Einen schönen.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Venerable Landtagssaal in Palais Niederösterreich. Before we get started, a housekeeping matter. This will be a German-speaking event, but there is interpretation into English. Channel 1 is English, Channel 2 is German. During the panel discussion, we'll have two panelists who speak English and two in German, just to let you know. So why are we here today? Now, in October 2019, the Austrian Parliament unanimously passed a groundbreaking and historic amendment to the Austrian Citizenship Act. It was a unanimous decision, which does not happen often. This gives the descendants of victims of National Socialism the opportunity to regain Austrian citizenship. Austria is constantly taking important steps to fulfill its historic responsibility, and this is a further building block in this process. Over 25,000 applications have been filed so far, and the number is growing. In this book, Austria and Us, Wie, Wir und Österreich, 15 people who have obtained Austrian citizenship in this way tell their story and the reasons why they decided to regain Austrian citizenship. There are different stories, of course. 12 out of these authors have come here for, we're going to see later on, where they will share their personal stories with us. So we'll start right now with an ex arte piece performed by the Adamus Quartet. The ex arte Center brings back music that was banned by the Nazi regime. The Adamus Quartet is committed to focusing on composers whose work was ostracized as degenerate by the National Socialist regime from 1930 onwards. In collaboration with Exilarte, the four musicians are always on the lookout for undiscovered compositions from that period, and I'm particularly pleased to announce that two pieces will be premiered here today. The first piece, Fuga by Egon Lustgarten. Egon Lustgarten was an Austrian composer and conductor. After the Anschluss of Austria by the German Reich, Lustgarten emigrated to the US in 1938 and lived there until he passed away. And we're now going to listen to this piece. Enjoy. Many thanks to the Adams Quartet for this wonderful piece of music. I would now like to ask Oskar Deutsch, president of the Jewish community of Vienna, for his opening remarks.
Sehr geehrter Bundesminister Schallenberg,
Minister Schallenberg,
sehr geehrter Botschafter des Staates Israel,
Ambassador of the State of Israel, David Roth, Excellencies,
sehr geehrte neue
dear
österreichische
new
Staatsbürger,
Austrian citizens,
sehr geehrte Damen und Herren.
ladies and gentlemen.
Österreich ist frei.
Österreich ist frei, Austria is free, proclaimed Foreign Minister Leopold Fiegel
Nach Unterzeichnung
after the signing of the State Treaty in 1955.
10 Jahre
10 years
nach dem Ende
after
des
the end of
Zweiten
World War
Weltkriegs
II,
war der Jubel
there was a great joy
wiedererlangte Souveränität
over Austria's
sehr groß.
regained sovereignty.
Österreich
Austria was free,
aber
but
Gerechtigkeit
justice
blieb den Opfern
was
der Shoah
denied to the victims of the Shoah for decades to come.
die Entrechtung,
The disenfranchisement, humiliation,
Vertreibung
expulsion, and mass murder
für den Österreicher zwischen
for which Austrians were responsible between 1938 and 1945
waren, wurde vielfach ausgeblendet.
were often ignored.
Man ging zu Tagesordnung.
It was business as usual.
Recht,
Justice, not revenge,
eines von
was one of Simon Wiesenthal's guiding principles
Tätern suchte
when he searched for perpetrators
zur Verantwortung.
and held them accountable under the rule of law.
Recht,
Justice,
Rache.
not revenge.
Das ist aus meiner
Well, in my view,
auch Kern
this is also
der Reform
at the heart of the reform of the Citizenship Act
2019.
in 2019. Section 58C
Ermöglicht
enables all survivors and their descendants
Wiedererlangung
to regain
österreichischen Staatsbürgerschaft.
Austrian citizenship.
Nach intensiven Verhandlungen
After intense negotiations with the federal government,
alle berücksichtigt, die der
all those who were subjected to Nazi persecution were actually taken into account.
auch der antisemitische
The anti-Semitic decree dating back to 1921,
nach Juden aus der
according to which Jews from the former Danube monarchy
rassistischen Gründen
were
die Option
denied the option of Austrian citizenship on racial grounds
wurde aufgehoben.
was also repealed.
Die Verleihung der Staatsbürgerschaft
The granting of citizenship under Section 58C is not a gift.
ist eine Restitution
It's a restitution
der Staatsbürgerschaft,
of the citizenship
die diesen Menschen
that was stolen from these people and their families.
mit Recht geschaffen.
This is an instance of justice being done.
Schönsten Erfahrungen, die ich mit den
Now, the
sind die Besuche
memories
der Österreich
that I have is the best experiences that I've had with the law are the visits of new Austrians to the Kultusgemeinde, the Jewish community. In a letter that new citizens receive, would cordially invite anyone and everyone to take a tour of the Vienna City Temple and meet me for a mélange, Austrian coffee, and a slice of Sacher cake. I've therefore had the good fortune to meet a number of new citizens in person. These conversations, these talks are an extraordinary privilege for me. Hearing the stories of the people who pass on the memory of the survivors is moving time and time again. I see how different the relationship to Austria is, how the descendants try to get closer to the former homeland of their ancestors, how many of them feel a profound connection and at the same time struggle to forgive. I often observe a conflict. It's something that I always convey to these people. Their newly acquired Austrian citizenship is not a gift. It's a kind of restitution. It belongs and is due to them. 3 days ago, on January 27th, it was the 79th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. On this day, thousands of people could be heard again, never again, or nie wieder in German. Now, what is this never again worth? Since October 7th, 2023 at the latest, it's become clear who means never again as an empty phrase and who actually means it seriously. The biggest massacre of Jews since the Shoah was carried out for anti-Semitic motives by terrorists whose proponents in Europe blame Israel as the Jews among the states, a perpetrator-victim reversal, if you like, that we know all too well from history. Anti-Semitic conspiracy lies about Israel are being spread worldwide, not only by violent groups, but also in democratic parliaments and by diplomats from liberal democracies. In Austria, many Jews were sitting on packed suitcases, as it were, until the 1990s. Where would most of them have gone if things became or had become unbearable again? The most common answers I came across were Israel, United States of America, Canada. It's different today. It's different after October the 7th. America is no longer safe. Despite the constant threats, Israel comes first. But Austria can also increasingly be perceived as a safe haven for Jews. A look at the international situation and the measures taken in Austria strengthens Austria's image worldwide. Never again is no longer an empty phrase here. I ask you, esteemed Mr. Foreign Minister, dear Alexander, do not let yourself be dissuaded from this path. Never swerve from it. Do not give an inch to the majority of dictators and despots in the UN. Israel is fighting a war that was started by the anti-Semitic Hamas that wants to annihilate Israel. Israel has been forced to fight a war on behalf of the world's liberal democracies. Survivors of the Shoah have always warned there was a before. The Shoah did not just come out of blue sky. To this day, witnesses, contemporaries are important ambassadors who make it clear that what is unimaginable actually happened. Naturally, they become fewer and fewer. It's therefore all the more important that their stories continue to be told. And therefore, a book such as the one presented today is becoming increasingly important. I would like to thank all the descendants and survivors who have told their stories for this book. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Oskar.
Thank you very much, Oskar Deutsch, for these important messages. You also launched an appeal to the Foreign Minister, and we now hand over to the Foreign Minister, Mr. Schallenberg. Dear Mr. President, dear Ossi, Madam Chancellor, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, but above all, dear guests of honor, this event revolves around you and is taking place because of you. I'd like to welcome you here most cordially as new Austrian citizens. Now, I know that many of you have had a long trip from Buenos Aires, Tel Aviv, London, New York, or even Australia, I've been told. Thanks for coming here and for giving us the honor to stage this event for you. Thank you. Now, we all know, well, this event was going to take place in November. Well, we all know that after the massacre of Hamas in Israel on the 7th of October, we just didn't want to celebrate. Now, today, this event is taking place in difficult times. I would like to pay tribute to Helga Habel-Stadler and Christoph von Hohenstein. Thanks for preparing this event, which is very, very important to me. Now, today, it's not just about presenting a book. Oscar Deutsch already referred to this. It's about more. Really, it's about the question of how we want to live together. What kind of society do we want to create in this country and in Europe at large? Now, this event is taking place because you have taken an important step. You made a leap of faith, as they say in English. You expressed your trust decades after your forefathers were cruelly denied their identity, their life, were deprived of their life and identity, and you decided to regain Austrian citizenship. Now, this is not something that we can take for granted. It has to be said again and again. This is not something that anyone can take for granted. Yes, in 2019, as was said before, Austria carried out a groundbreaking reform of the Citizenship Act. The descendants of the Holocaust victims were given a chance to regain citizenship, which is crucial. It's not something new. It's sort of regaining Austrian citizenship. But you are now breathing new life into this amendment, this reform. And what you've done is, well, you've expressed your trust in us, in this society, in this country. It's a society which for far too long did not look into its past and didn't come to terms with its past. For much too long, lies were propagated, a society that wanted to ignore what happened between 38 and 45, as well as the years afterwards. But it's a society which now is taking decisive action to counter this, so that these discussions can take place and Austria comes to terms with its past and looks into the darkest chapters of its history. Never again. This is something that we want to put into practice. Now, with your step, the steps that you've taken, thanks to your commitment, well, you've also said that you were prepared to open up a new chapter in Austrian history. It's a new chapter that involves you as Austrian citizenships. Each and every one of you is writing this story, is contributing to this story. And again, this is not something that any of us take for granted. As Austrian Foreign Minister, I would like to thank you most cordially for placing your trust in us. Thank you very much for having accepted, again, the Austrian citizenship.
Wissen Sie was?
Well, and this doesn't happen often to me because, you know, I feel so proud now because sometimes we do manage to do good things. It's better late than never. We have taken the right steps and drawn important conclusions. And what you have done is something that has an impact and enriches our society. Quite frankly, as foreign minister, let me say that this act of restituting the citizenship in London, New York, Tel Aviv, well, this is one of the nicest things that any foreign minister could do. Almost 26,000 new Austrian citizens we now welcome in our society, and this number is increasing. It's not that there are peaks, no, it's a constant increase. It's people that have opted again for Austria. Now, each and every one of you has painful stories to tell. So it's an enrichment, but it's also painful memories. Now, together with the Jewish community of Vienna, we have collected these stories in the book, some of these stories. It's multifaceted memories, emotions, hopes, expectations, fulfilled hopes and dashed hopes. And these stories are the expression of thousands of other stories. It's also young people here. We have students from the Klosterneuburg High School. I'm pretty sure you're over there. So it's great to see that you've accepted our invitation as well. It's a new generation that I'm appealing to. They have to be attentive. They have to put never again into practice and carry on this important mission. Well, as I said, by way of introduction, this is a joyous celebration, but it's also an event that reminds us of October 7th that changed our world. Now, the Middle East is a region of cruelty, but what happened on October 7th, that was just unimaginable. Now, I was called that Saturday, and my services asked me, well, Mr. Minister, do you tolerate pain? And then I watched the footage, and they will be with me until the end of my days. What happened there, I mean, that was just, that makes you angry. That was just unimaginable. It also makes people afraid, and it reminds us of cruelty, Daesh cruelty. This was a medieval slaughtering, and we have to take a clear-cut stance, and this is what Austria did there. There can be no equidistance. There can be no equivalence. There is Hamas on the one hand and the democratic state of Israel on the other hand, and there can be no equidistance, or you cannot in any way put those two on the same level. Now, 116 days later, we're not seeing an end to the suffering and the violence that has been perpetrated. Hamas is continuing attacks. Terrorists have more than 130 people and hold them captive. And there is an Austrian family father who continues to be hostage. So Austria is very much committed to Israel in these difficult times. Make no mistake about it. Austria is very, very committed to Israel. Dear Ossi, dear Mr. President, I am never going to swerve from this path. Tonight, or this afternoon rather, I will meet Israeli mothers of hostages, and that's very important for me. It's not just about our historical responsibility as Austrians. Yes, this is an important part. It's also about something else. Israel is the only pluralistic, democratic state with the rule of law in the Middle East. Just look at the world situation. Now, free societies and democracies should actually stick together and help each other. That, too, is an important part of our partnership with Israel. At the same time, there's no doubt about the fact that more needs to be done to help civilians in the Gaza Strip and protect them. Yes, we need to provide humanitarian aid. Now, one human suffering cannot be replaced by another human suffering. that won't be possible. Israelis and Palestinians will not dissolve into thin air, and intellectually there is no other way for me. Palestinians and Israelis need to live side by side in peace. The two-state solution and normalization with the Arab world, there's no way around it. Even though it may look like an illusion, we have to be persistent in terms of realizing those goals. This will only enhance Israel's safety and security. And for us, Israel's security is primordial. That is what we stand for as the Austrian government. But what also affected me deeply is something else. And Oscar Deutsch, you were there. What has this conflict triggered in our societies? I will never forget the 11th of October. There was an event at Bathhausplatz, We Stand with Israel. That was a beautiful event. The Speaker of the Austrian Parliament, the Chancellor spoke, you spoke as well. But then the organizers, at the end of the event, the organizers uttered a lot of words. You know, there were a lot of Jewish flags, and they said, "Dear friends, dear guests, please just don't go to St. Stephen's Cathedral, because that was where the pro-Palestine demonstration took place from the river to the sea, which is now banned, but go to Burgtheater and think about whether the kippah and the flags, whether you would be prepared to show them openly." And that was painful to me. I mean, how can that be in October 2023 in Austria? You know, people are told you might want to reconsider wearing the flag or showing your flag, because it might actually become too dangerous. But this is unacceptable, that this is considered a danger. All of us need to take action at any point in time. We need to make sure that we fight against every single form of anti-Semitism. We must never shun our responsibility. We should be quite open and frank about this. Never again is now. Never again is now. That's the right slogan, and I'm quite grateful to see so many high school students here as well. Never again is now. Please remember this every day, wherever you are. And you are all an enriching part of our society, and with you, it will be possible to put this into practice. Now, of course, what you experience is great pain, and you're listening to the Austrian foreign minister. This may also be painful to you, but I'm very, very grateful to you. And you are now part and parcel of Austrian society, and I'm actually quite upbeat and optimistic about Austria's future because of you. Thanks to you. Thanks for being here, and thanks for this act of generosity. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, Herr Außenminister.
Thank you very much. Oscar Deutsch said it before. It's a restitution to you, ladies and gentlemen, who have regained their citizenship. And it's also an act of trust, a leap of faith, as he said, for you to be ready to accept the Austrian citizenship. We cannot take this for granted. 12 of you, who are also represented in this book, Austria and Us, and who have co-written this book, are here today. And I would like to ask 4 of you to join me on stage and share your history and your story with us. Evelyn Konrad. Alex Boyd. Dorit Strauss. And the youngest among them, Ezekiel Max. Please take your seat at the other side of the room. Thank you. Evelyn Konrad, You can't tell if you look at you, but you're 95 years old. You're the most experienced author here today. I think that merits an applause. Well, this is something special. You're the most experienced author here, and you're also very committed to commemorative culture. You were born in 1928 in Vienna. At 8 years, you left Vienna, and you have a very stormy history and story. I can just recommend to everyone here to read this book because it's so interesting and informative. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, here today, but I would be interested in your motivation to accept the Austrian citizenship, to regain the citizenship. I know that your 4 children helped you get there. Yes, that's true. They insisted. I was in a lot of doubt, and I hesitated, and I could tell that a lot of other people felt in a similar way, because a lot of them had a very complicated history with Austria. And we don't believe in the sins of the fathers. That was something that I've heard a lot. And this is a new generation here now today, and I feel truly at home in Vienna now these days. You have a very complex and painful relationship to Vienna. And now, as you're a new citizen of the country, does it take something away from the pain? Does it help you make peace with your own story? Well, it's the story of my Omuti, my grandma, that was incomprehensible and cannot be forgiven, but the perpetrators have long died, and the new generation is wonderful. It's just the way my mother remembered Vienna, so I feel truly at home now in this city. Your 4 children, I don't want to say they persuaded you, but I think they tried to convince you to accept the Austrian citizenship. But was this a longer process? Did you have to take a long time thinking about it? No, nobody convinces me. I take all the decisions in my life. So that is my Hungarian heritage of both my parents, and I convinced myself to do it, and in the end I was very glad I did, because the people who worked in the Austrian consulate in New York City, they were so nice and welcoming, and I have the best memories of them, and they were really wonderful. Alex Boyd. You're the great-grandson of Sigmund Freud, and member of the 2nd generation. You now live in the UK, and you said in this book that your true motivation to accept the Austrian citizenship was because of Brexit. Can you explain a little bit?
Unity is always better than division. It was a nationalistic expression, and I didn't want to be deprived of my European belonging. And so I thought, how can I go around rectifying this? My father was born in Berlin. I didn't know whether he was German or Austrian, and I did some digging. And
It's not the same.
No, well, yeah. So he fled Berlin. His father also fled Berlin, which made it complicated. But I was told I could go back further generations, and Sigmund fled Vienna late in 1939, and 4 of his sisters were murdered by the Nazis. And then I began to get this connection with Austria. You were good enough to give me a passport, and made me feel. What I really liked was that I wasn't applying. I was reclaiming my right, which was, and the process was made really easy. I was also lucky because I didn't have to, provide details of who lived where when. It was all in the public domain. So this is my first time in Vienna. I used to.
Gefällt's Ihnen? Do you like it?
Yes, everything looks like an ornamental cake. So,
Es sieht nicht überall in Wien so aus wie hier. Aber
and I like a schnitzel. I do. I do want to say that I grew up. My father never mentioned he was Jewish. I didn't. I kind of read about it later on, and so my sense of I've never felt particularly Jewish. My mother wasn't, so technically I'm not. So it was very interesting to look back and find, to find. I don't want to be controversial, but I do think all life is equally sacred. And I think that though awful what happened on October the 7th, I do think that the response from Israel has been disproportionate. And I think that children and civilians everywhere need to be looked after. And it does bother me sometimes that sometimes some life is seen as more precious than others. So it was uncomfortable for me hearing some of this, and I thought perhaps I should keep quiet, but it doesn't sit right with me. I've, for many, many years, given to an organization called Jewish Voice for Peace. So I did want to say, I don't want to ruin everyone's buzz, but it was important for me to say this for myself. But I'm really glad to be here. It's really interesting to find myself amongst this community with these discussions.
das heißt aber, Sie haben auch ein bisschen.
But that means that you were thinking a lot more about your own history and your story while you were reclaiming your Austrian citizenship. Can you say that? That you spend a lot of time thinking about your own story?
It was interesting because, my father was a well-known painter, and I was talking to him once, and I said, I was a youngster, youngsters like Salvador Dali. I said, did you ever meet Salvador Dali? He said, my father said, he was obsessed with my grandfather. So very early on, I learned to have no interest in Sigmund. It was like, that's what you should do. So I almost made it my business to know nothing. So this application for Austrian citizenship meant that I started digging. And the ambassador in London.
And it didn't feel like an application, you said before.
It was, they made it very easy for me. It was I got in quite early. I don't know, because of my illustrious ancestry, I was fast-tracked or anything, but it was very smooth. And I valued that. And it's so lovely to be given the freedom to be where I want. I will say one minor political thing about Brexit is people voted for the end of free movement without realising it included them. Yeah. It was like
yes, you're right.
So it was quite myopic, but it's lovely to be here. I feel honoured to be invited and selected from the 26,000 to be amongst the small four, and I thank you very much for inviting me and including me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex Boyd. Dorit Strauss, Sie sind auch Angehörige.
Dorit Strauss, you're also a member of the second generation. Your family had to flee their home country. It was from Vienna, and you spoke German at home, but that's a long time ago. But how important was it for you to reclaim your Austrian citizenship? Were there any doubts? Did you hesitate and think to yourself, I don't really want it?
I think it was an evolution, because had it just come out of the blue without the prior opportunities that I had to be in Vienna to do different things, it probably wouldn't have seemed natural. But I had been to Vienna the first time in the 90s, and it was part of a trip going to Budapest and also Prague. And when it included a trip to Vienna, sort of an afterthought. When I came back home to the United States, my father was still alive. And I was telling him all these wonderful events that I went to, musical events, because we come from a very musical family in Budapest and in Prague. And he said, and what about Vienna? And I was just saying, I went here, I went there. He corrected my pronunciation of everything. And he kept saying, Vienna is a beautiful city, it's a beautiful city. And I just, for the first time, this is 1993, that I realized how much he loved Vienna. He grew up here from an infant and left at the age of 22 in 1936, thanks to a person that I have to mention that people have forgotten about, a very famous musician by the name of violinist, by the name of Branislav Huberman, who is adored here in Vienna. And young people should really look him up, because not only was he a great violinist, but he was a great human being, one of the earliest people who believed in the pan-European movement and so forth. So he was more than a musician, he was almost like a diplomat. But he saved my entire family. And I knew that. And I knew a little bit about Vienna. And it was sort of seeped into the blood, because even though I grew up in Tel Aviv, near Tel Aviv, in Israel, where, in the 50s, where the memories of the Holocaust were still very, very powerful. And my father came to join the new orchestra in Tel Aviv with Branislav Huberman, who founded it. Everybody in the orchestra was from a refugee from some Nazi persecution. The language of the orchestra was German, so I heard a lot of German. But he didn't speak to me in German, my father. He was, he was a citizen. His first citizenship, he told me, he was stateless until the state of Israel became a state, and that was his first citizenship. And I remembered that when I never imagined that I would be qualified to get Austrian citizenship. But when I heard about it, and I said, my father always said he was stateless. I should really, why was that? He was so much part of the life here in Vienna. He lived his life here among the top echelons of society. He was a child prodigy who played in all the salons, in the Ifrusi, the Bloch-Bauer, the Altman brothers. All these people were his patrons. They made him who he was. This society of Vienna was what made my father and what made me. And he was stateless. And here the state is coming and offering citizenship to me. I said, this I cannot refuse. I have to do it for the family. So it was an evolution. I came again. I donated in 2012 my father's musical archives to the musical library of the city of Vienna at the Rathaus. And there was a beautiful event that they did. And then I was so happy to see the musicians from Exil Art, because a couple of years ago I donated the rest of the musical archive to the Exil Art Foundation. So which is really great. Yeah, I feel like I am reclaiming not only heritage, but my father's youth and my own youth, because his life in Vienna made him who he was for the rest of his life, and I think it's in my genes. So I think he would be very happy to know that, because he's passed away for many years now. And then my aunts, who are also from Vienna, born here and raised here and were part of the musical fabric here. I mean, one of the things that I gave to the Musical Library of Vienna was my Aunt Toni Grunschlag's diploma from the Akademie, which she had the highest honors, but she graduated after the Anschluss. So it's a big swastika on her diploma, which is, not to be believed. But, I feel it's my city.
Thank you very much, Dorit Strauss. Isaac Wilmax, Sie sind Angehöriger der
You're a member of the fourth generation. You were born in 2001 in Buenos Aires. Your great-grandparents had to flee from Austria, and your family emigrated to Argentina. And these days you live in Vienna because you fell in love, and maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that. Well, the fact that I live in Europe and want to study here, that was something that I've always wanted to do, not just because of the situation in Argentina, but also because of the close ties that I have with my family's history. And in 2018, I was lucky enough to meet a beautiful girl at an event in Poland. It was a commemorative event where we visited Auschwitz, and I met her. I asked her, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Vienna." And at that moment, I knew it was faith, and I was immediately in love. My great aunt Lotte also fled from Vienna, and until her death in 2013, I spent wonderful days with her. She always described Vienna for me that sounded like something out of a fairy tale, and I've always wanted to see it for myself. And in 2019, I finally got to visit the city. I met my girlfriend, and we took the decision very fast. I already had the German citizenship, but I knew that I wanted to study and live in Vienna. And for my family, this was something quite out of the ordinary, especially for my grandparents, who have much closer ties to our family's history, of course. For my grandma, for example, it was a difficult decision, difficult to accept somewhat. But after Austria decided in the parliament to restitute the citizenship to us, not just to my family, but to everyone else who had to flee from the Nazis and everyone who had been persecuted and who are rightfully Austrian citizenship, because we have jus sanguinis, so everyone who is descendant of Austrians is an Austrian, and that answered all of our questions. I came to Vienna, I've never once looked back, I have no regrets, and I feel right at home. I can tell from what you're telling me that you are planning on staying here. Is that right? Yes, it looks that way. Wonderful. Thank you very much for your personal stories that you were kind enough to share with us today. And I think that merits a very big applause. And Ms. Evelyn Konrad, Alex Boyd, Dorit Strauss, Ezequiel Max, thank you for being here today.
Ja, das waren wirklich ganz berührende, besondere und einzigartige.
This is very moving to hear all of these unique stories. And now I have the great pleasure of announcing the second premiere today by Walter Süskind, a piece titled Our Reckoning. It's a suite in 10 movements. And the Adamas Quartet is going to play two of them, the jazz experience and our future is not going to be a fragment. Süskind was a Czech-British composer, pianist and conductor who fled from Prague in May 1939, 2 days before the German invasion, and he died in 1980. And then you will hear our two hymns, the Austrian hymn and the European hymn, as a gesture of welcome for our new citizens.
Vielen Dank nochmals dem
Thank you very much, the Adamas Quartet, for premiering 2 pieces today. This brings us to the end of our event. Now I would like to ask you for another big applause for the 12 new citizens of Austria, especially for Evelyn Konrad, Alex Boyd, Dorit Strauss, and Ezekiel Max, for telling us their story. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here, for joining us, for listening to the stories. And now the foreign minister asks you to join him for a reception in the halls here at the Landtagssaal. Thank you very much.